Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here and I'm back with another video for Neat and Tangled. Today I'm going to be using the Your Pretty stamps and dies as well as the Grateful Heart stamps and dies. And then the other thing, which is new for us, is this Over the Rainbow paper pack, and that is where I got this Robin's Egg blue color cardstock that I'm working with. They're wonderful, super heavyweight cardstocks, and I love them. And I love that it's a rainbow pack because I love rainbows. So I've been speaking of things I love, super loving this kind of dramatic ink blending background trend that has been going on in the card making community. And so I wanted to do my own, but I wanted to do an emboss resist. So here what I'm doing is I have the large image from the Grateful Heart set, and I'm going to stamp this all over the background in Versamark ink. So what I'm doing is not what you should do. Well, it depends. If you're super particular about your background and where and everything, you want everything to be perfect, then you're probably going to want to clean off your stamp in between each stamping. I am not that particular because I know that it's going to be the background piece and it's not going to be the focal point. So I'm not super stressing about it. So I'm not cleaning the stamp off in between. But like I said, it will still have some ink on it. There is a chance you will get ink where you don't want it. I know that I can just clean it off with a craft pick or a paintbrush when I'm done before I heat emboss it. So I'm not super stressing about it. I have stamped it out 3 times now. And I'm going to go ahead and put clear embossing powder on top of it and heat set that. The reason that I'm taking a break in the middle is so that I have somewhere to hold the paper each time I'm doing it, because I'm going to cover the whole background. So you'll notice that when we stamped originally in the Versamark, the clear sticky ink, it did get slightly darker, and then adding the clear embossing powder, it gets darker still. This is a beautiful tone on tone technique that you can do anytime. You could just stamp the Versamark for a lighter impression, or you can heat set it with the clear embossing powder and get that beautiful tone-to-tone effect. I'm going to do the same thing-ish, but I want mine to be much more dramatic. I want it to have a lot more flair. So I'm going to do some ink blending on top of that in some much deeper, richer colors. And then you'll still be able to see this through. That's why it's called an emboss resist. And it's an old, I've seen this technique forever. I mean, even when I got into card making, but it's still one that is worth bringing back because it does kind of pack a punch. And if you don't want tone on tone, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use some darker teals, but you could do other colors and totally switch it up. And it's just a super cool technique. So when you're stamping something that you want to look like pattern paper, like I'm doing here, you want to make sure that when you're doing your stamping, you notice I started with the large image in the center, because if you just start filling up all of the sides and you don't fill the center, you may not have room. Your stamp may be too large to fit into that spot. So I always start with the center and then work my way out to the edges, so that way I'm sure everything is covered and has pattern on it. I don't have any weird gaps or anything like that. Especially when working with a larger image. The other thing that you're probably going to notice, which is, Card Professional 101 over here, is that some of the images do appear darker. And that is true. And it's because my stamp isn't completely clean. That, again, is something that I just didn't do. I don't spend a lot of time cleaning my stamps because it doesn't bother me if they're stained. Now that can kind of come back to bite you in situations like this where it kind of revitalizes that ink, but because I know I'm doing all of the ink blending over top of it, again, I am not super stressed about it. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal when I was making it, and I know that it wasn't because of the way that the card came out. So here I did get a fingerprint or something in the background, and I'm just cleaning that up with a number 2 round brush. It's the smallest brush that I have, but for smaller areas I have also used my craft pick to get in there, and then the static helps it stick to the metal, and then you can just lift it off. So once all of this is heat set, then we're going to get into the inking portion of it, which is really kind of where it makes it magical. I chose tumbled glass, peacock feathers, mermaid lagoon, and chip sapphire. At the end, I am going to add in some black soot just because I felt like these colors were not dramatic enough. But you can stop at any level that you're happy with. I am doing the tumbled glass all over. You don't have to. You can certainly leave like a halo or a lighter section to make it like a gradient. But I wanted there to be an emboss resist all over the card. So that is why I chose to do the tumbled glass right on top of everything. And you'll see that it does get more difficult to see because this color is very similar to the darker color, but it won't stay that way. So just hang tight. You'll see as we start to add more and more darker colors that the lightness that we've kind of trapped underneath the embossing powder really does start to show through. So why did I choose Distress inks? You can do this with Distress oxides, but because they aren't, because they're a combination of dye and pigment inks versus just dye inks like regular Distress, they are not as rich and they dry with kind of a chalky finish, which is super beautiful, but not when you're looking for contrast. And so the traditional Distress inks create much more contrast. Now, by no means do you have to use the Distress line. Any ink that you own that you can ink blend with will totally work for this. So whatever you have, like, you do you. So here's where we're adding that chip sapphire out on the edges. And that's like the darkest color, and you can really start to see that embossing kind of pop through. This was, like I said earlier, not as dark as I wanted it. I wanted something that was going to be much more dramatic, and that is why the black soot came into play. And even though I'm only adding it on the edges, the corners and then just the very edges of the paper, you can see even just adding that little bit really like just takes it up a notch. It makes a huge difference in the way that the piece looks. And then I always do mine twice. I feel like that gives me the best blend. So I will be going back through all of those colors that we just went through and kind of bringing them in a little bit more so you can see more of that emboss resist as the colors get darker. For the focal point, that Your Pretty set is probably honestly one of my favorite sets that Neat and Tangled ever released, because the sentiments are just so awesome. It's, you're pretty strong, pretty kind, just all of these things that are super encouraging. And that set is actually on sale. The stamp and the die are on sale because it's being retired. And while I am super sad to see it go, I'm happy that I could kind of use it one more time before its run was over. But yeah, that set was awesome. Totally loved it. So here the background is done. I did not feel the need to go over the embossing and kind of buff it. But if you feel like you have ink sitting on top, just take a cloth and kind of buff over top of it. If that isn't working as well as you want, you can use a slightly damp cloth, but I would not recommend using a wet one because you will start to wipe off that Distress ink because it's made to work with water. So here, these are the parts for my focal point, which is from that same set. They're just the individual flowers. So I'm going to stamp 2 of the large ones and 1 of the small buds, just so I'm working in odd numbers, so I'll have 3 of them to put together around my sentiment. Again, just basic design, working in odd numbers is more pleasing to the eye. If you work in even numbers, your brain automatically tries to pair them. It starts to look for a pattern. It's just the way the human brain works. So if you work in odds, you can appreciate it more as a piece overall. Here I have several yellows, some golden browns, and some oranges, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing all of my coloring with for my flowers. I'm going to start just by coloring this one flower a golden yellow. I thought that would be super pretty with the kind of teal we had going on in the background, but I also like really dynamic colors, and the way that they work together, and the way that you can make them work together with Copic. So I'm going to show you how to do it with just the yellow, and then I'm going to show you how I add the other colors in. And you can do this with any color that is next to each other on the color wheel. So like I chose yellow and orange, but I could have gone yellow and green if I wanted to. Not that I would want to put that on a flower, but I could have. Or I could have gone like a yellow and like a pink. Would work still, like up there in that red family. So as long as they're kind of, 1 to 2 colors away from each other on the color wheel, it will usually work. As far as adding the shading, the illustrator here has done all of the work for me. So I can just look for those little lines and add my shading where he's already put it in there. And I'm just being very light-handed, working lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest like I usually do. Shading will be any point where 2 objects meet or any point where one object lays on top of another. So that would be where you would want to add your shading. And I added minimal shading to begin with all the way out to my darkest color because I'm very heavy-handed and I know I need to leave a large highlight. Your dimension lies in your shadows and your highlights. If you have a flat image, try adding some darker color or a lighter highlight. So you'll see here just going through and doing that flicking and then working my way back out to my lightest color. And this is how I color almost everything. In some rare occurrences, if something is really small, I might start with my darkest color just because I know I don't have a lot of real estate to work with. But most of the time, this is how I roll. Now, for those of you who have been around a super long time, you might be like, Kelly, I've watched a bunch of your videos and I already know all of this. And it's because I have said it multiple times. But the reason that every once in a while I do try to recap just my general coloring style is because I'm super blessed and you guys are totally awesome. And so I'm gaining new followers all the time. And while I love that you guys come for story time, this channel is intended to teach you something and I want you to walk away learning something. And so sometimes we have to touch back to home base and go over the things that I want you to learn. Not just, watching the coloring, but also talking about the how and the why are for what we're doing. So for this little bud over here, well, let me go back. Not that doesn't mean that there won't be story time today. There will be, but this is also in addition to some instruction. So this one over here is the one I'm doing the orange colors, and you'll be able to see the difference. Eventually, I am going to add some orange to the other 2 flowers, and we'll talk about that when that time comes along. But I just wanted you to see the 2 different color combinations in action. Several people ask about color combinations or what color combinations I use. That is over on my blog, which is usually linked in the YouTube description, but not always. It just kind of depends on what kind of week it's been. If it's been a week like this, it ain't linked. But it's usually linked there. If not, you can always find it just on my blog, You and Your Big Dreams. And I have a Copic color combination page if you're ever wondering what my kind of go-tos are for specific things. And I do pretty much stick to the same type of combinations just because I like brighter colors. So here's all of them done. We're going to go in and add that orange shading now. So I'm starting with the lightest color on this one, and I am really randomly picking where I'm going to lay this down, just so the yellow flower has a little bit more orange in it and it kind of makes the flower more interesting. So from that lightest color, I'm moving to the next darkest color and then to back to the kind of like mid-tone to kind of blend it all out. In the other flower, I believe I'm going to start with the darkest color and then work out to my lightest, because when you have a base already down, you don't necessarily need to go lightest to darkest. And I was nervous with the first one that I would be going too dark too fast, but then once I did it, I realized it was totally fine. I could just add the darker color and they would still look just fine. So story time. This week has just been a week, y'all. So my dad is still sick. He has finally agreed to go to the doctor. Thank you, Jesus. I do not understand what it is about men, and especially men from that generation, that they just refuse to go to the doctor. It's maddening. Like, what, like, do you think that you're going to go to the doctor and they're just going to like saw off your arm? They're going to send you home with one arm? Like, is that what you think's going to happen? Like, I don't know. Just like my rational thought process is, if I have a problem and person A knows how to fix it and I can't fix it myself, I'm going to try to fix it myself for sure. But if I can't fix it, then I'm going to contact person A and be like, excuse me, can you help me fix my problem? It does not, like, rationally, it does not make any sense to me to be like, I have this problem and person A knows how to fix my problem, but I can't fix this problem by myself, so I am just going to do nothing. I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to put my head in the sand and pretend like this is not occurring. It like, something does not compute in my brain with that. And it just seems like there's a whole, and I'm not like crazy pro antibiotics either. I don't want anything to do with those unless I need them. Back to the card, just in case you've never been here before, I always outline all of my images because I feel like it makes the image pop. This is not something that you have to do. It's something that I choose to do. And several people have said, can you just stamp it again with your Misty? Yes, I could. I don't choose to do it that way. I choose to do it this way. Going to add just a couple of white dots to the inside of the flower, like the little stamen. And then I'm going to use their matching dies to go ahead. No, I'm lying. I don't do it often, but sometimes that happens because I forget the steps. So here I stamped out the sentiment, which is the "You're Pretty," and I thought I was going to do black on white and then die cut it out, which I did do, but I didn't like. And so eventually I'm going to go to black on white, which is the card that you see. But before I did the die cutting, I wanted to get it stamped. Okay, moving on. So he did finally go to the doctor. They put him on stronger antibiotics. So he's riding that out now. Graham's still in the rehab. My mother is on the struggle bus, y'all. It's so hard for her, and I get it. I do, that she doesn't want her to be in there and she wants her to be home. But like, just being realistic of what her needs are right now, what her level of care is. Like, my mother would do anything for somebody that she loved, and obviously especially her mother, and I understand it because she's my mother. So I totally get it, but she's really having a hard time with Graham being in a facility and not being at home. So if you could just send up some prayers for my mama and my Graham, I would totally appreciate it. And Dad too. Like, don't forget him because he's still sick. I would really appreciate it. So, as most of you know, I've told you several times, I couldn't survive my life without my parents, and pretty much this past week is what I've had to do, because they're my child care. They are my child care for Peanut, and so when they were out of town, I didn't pick up any extra jobs. I just worked my regular job, and honestly, that I worked minimally because I had, me and my ex-husband were, juggling who was going to take off what, when, where to get Peanut to and from school. So this week I was making up for it by picking up extra hours at my other jobs. And then obviously we didn't know Dad was going to be sick and Graham was going to be in the facility. So Eric totally stepped up. And the week before he would have, let me clarify that, he totally would have, but he already has his schedule. And I told you before, he works a mad ton of hours and he works a lot of doubles. So this week, Peanut came over. My ex-husband drops him off in the morning to me before he goes to work at 6:30 in the morning. So Peanut comes over at 6:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, including this morning. Monday, I took him to school. And then I just worked a regular job. Tuesday and Wednesday, I had my other job that I had to be at 9. Well, the doors of his school don't even open until then. You cannot get in. So I can't be two places at once, because even though all of you all are very complimentary and I love you for it, think that I'm Superwoman, I'm actually not. And so Eric ended up taking him to school for me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because Thursday in my regular job, I went back to regular day shift and I have to be there at 8. So it was kind of like a whole piecemeal together, everybody's schedule to get everybody where they need to be. And it was just so exhausting. So my Tuesday, and I broke my tooth on a starburst of all things. It pulled part of my filling out. Isn't that lovely? So Tuesday, I got up at 6:30, got the peanut, and then got, did all the things you normally do, the breakfast, everything else, and we're trying not to eat out because it's healthier, but also to save money because we're saving up for the wedding. So I would either come home from work and make dinner for the next day, or I would make dinner for the next day in the morning. Do his breakfast, all of that stuff, get him ready for school. He's really on this kick where he's super into doing his hair right now, so we have to do that as well. And then I would go to work at the first job. Tuesday, I left there a little bit early to go to the dentist to get my tooth filled. Praise Jesus, I didn't have to have a cap because those things are bucks I don't have. So then from there, I went to the next job, worked until 10, came home. Did I make dinner that night? No, I think I marinated pork chops that night. I just put them, yeah, I think I just marinated pork chops that night. And then the following morning, again, 6:30 in the morning, do all the things with the peanut in the morning, and then went to the next job, worked that until 1, left there, went to my next job, worked until 10 p.m. And then today I switched to regular day shift. So for me, that's 8 to 4. So it's just crazy. My mama is coming over tomorrow, and I feel bad because I know like she's doing all this stuff with Graham, but I also know that she really has not seen Nathan, and she misses him like crazy when she doesn't see him. So she's gonna come over tomorrow morning to see him and take him to school, and he's very excited to see her, and I'm sure she's very excited to see him. So it's just kind of been like a crazy shuffle week, and this is not a complaint whatsoever, because I know how blessed I am that I have parents who are still here to help me and who are willing to help me. Because there's a lot that aren't. And I'm super blessed, and, like Eric stepping up and taking care of Peanut and getting him from point A to point B and making sure he's not late for school and, all of those things. So even though I'm a tired duck, I'm a lucky duck. Y'all know what I'm saying. So there really hasn't been a ton of card making, but I do have some previous videos that were made that are kind of waiting in the wings. So I'm hoping to get those all done. So here, just to finish off the card, I added some sequins. That's from our magic mix. And then I'm adding some clear glitter on top of the flowers, and then that's it. So even though it's a little bit busier than I normally do, I don't think it's so busy that it's in your face, and I was really happy with the way that it came out. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.